Welcome to Ogre's Kitchen. I'm Chef Ogre. Let's check our prep list and see what we have cooking today. In the previous video, I showed you a recipe how to make a basic marinade. So in this recipe, I'm going to show you a few different uses for that basic marinade by creating a variation. And then I'm going to go ahead and make a Greek chicken dish with that marinade. Let's head to the kitchen and get to work. For this marinade, and we're going to do some alterations to it as well. So we're actually going to be adding some ingredients in. And my plan for this is to do kind of a Greek style marinated chicken. So I'm going to add in to this basic marinade, which originally consists of white wine vinegar, canola oil, parsley, salt, and Dijon mustard. So all those flavors are a great base level to start with. But to that, I'm going to add some lemon juice, some thyme and oregano, some garlic, about 3 or 4 cloves, and then I actually have some olive juice that comes from a container of olives. So all of these things are going to help add great elements of flavor that I'm going to put over this chicken and use as a marinade. And because this container is quite deep enough, I'm actually going to use this container itself to marinate the chicken. Also, what I'm going to do is I'm going to marinate some olives with this marinade as well, to help add some flavors and tie all the flavors together for the finished dish. And those olives will go on as a garnish at the end. So we've already made our recipe here, the basic marinade. So in order to add these ingredients, I'm simply just going to add them and then use my immersion blender once again to just mix everything up and make sure everything's well blended. So I'm going to go ahead and start with about a half a cup of olive juice. Those come from Kalamata olives. So what you'll find is that a lot of olives actually have vinegar and oil and sometimes some herbs and seasonings in the liquid that they're sitting in. So it's a great ingredient to use and add into different dishes. Just be careful, it can tend to be a little salty since it's a little on the briny side. Next I'm going to add my garlic, and because the immersion blender is going to be doing the work here, that could just be roughly chopped. Next, we're going to add the thyme and oregano. Again, with the oregano, if you have a lot of the stems that are not too woody, you can go ahead and throw those right in. They add flavor. Same thing with the thyme if you have nice tender stems, but I would tend to try to get rid of some of the more woodsy stems because those won't blend up as nicely. Lastly, we're going to add our lemon juice. Again, because this marinade's already blended and mostly emulsified, I don't have to worry about this acid going in before everything else. But if I were going to do this on a base level and start with lemon juice in it, I'd probably add that right from the beginning along with my vinegar. So what I've done is for half a lemon, I've zested it to add extra flavor, and then I squeeze the juice out. And now we're just going to go ahead and blend this all together with our immersion blender. Now that this is all blended up, those flavors should be pretty well imparted into this marinade. As you can see, the texture of it's gotten some viscosity from everything being well blended together. So now what I'm going to do is, because I want to marinate the olives with this without the chicken being in there first, I have my olives, and this is a mix of Kalamata, some Manzanilla, and some Frescatrano olives, a Greek style olive, these ones here. And what I'm going to do is just I'm going to ladle out some of this marinade just to coat these olives. That way it imparts a little bit of extra flavor onto them, makes them extra delicious, because olives are already pretty delicious on their own, but add a little extra flavor to them like this and they'll be even better. What I have here is just a regular industry pint container. These come with lids, which is really handy, convenient way to store things, and also hold something that maybe you're marinating. So we'll set that aside, and then we bring out our chicken. So next we have our chicken here. And this is a chicken thigh, which I feel like is a very forgiving cut of the chicken because it retains moisture a little better. I find them to be fantastically flavorful, and they'll hold the marinade really well. So what I'm going to do is marinate these and put them in the fridge probably overnight. You want at least a couple hours so the marinade actually does its work, but overnight is absolutely best. I'll just use a pair of tongs here, and I'll add this to our marinade. Have this set and ready. Next, we're going to prep up the rest of the ingredients that we're going to need for this dish. This includes one whole onion that gets split in half, with one half going towards our rice pilaf, and the other half will be chopped, caramelized, and go as a garnish for our asparagus. Next, we have 4 cloves of garlic, which will go towards our asparagus as well. Next, we'll trim our asparagus. Then we'll zest and juice half a lemon. And lastly, we'll chop up some herbs for the final presentation of the dish. These herbs include mint, oregano, and parsley. It's been maybe 24 hours since we've put our stuff in the marinade. So we've had our olives marinating. We've also had our chicken marinating. So now we're going to actually remove everything from the marinade. And for the olives, I'm actually going to save this marinade because I'm going to use it to impart some more flavor into what we're cooking today, which is the Greek chicken dish. So the Greek chicken dish will consist of asparagus. We're going to do a rice pilaf, and obviously the chicken as well. So first, we're going to just drain off as much of the liquid off these olives as we can. Doesn't have to be perfect, just so we get some of that marinating liquid off the olives. We're actually going to use this to help us saute some of the ingredients for our rice pilaf because there is oil in here. There's also other flavors. But we're going to flavor that rice pilaf as well. Again, we'll start this off on the side because this is going to be one of the garnishes for our Greek chicken. This is the chicken that's been marinating overnight. And what we're going to do again is we're going to remove it from the marinade. Use a pair of tongs to get in here. I'm also wearing gloves just in case. And what I've done here is I set up a small roasting rack on top of a sheet tray. So that way this can drain off just a little bit. And that way I could actually just draw the chicken across to get rid of some of that excess heavy marinade. Now if we were going to pop this straight into the oven like this, I might just leave all that marinade on there. But what I want to do with this chicken is actually give it a little bit of a sear first. That way it'll help put some color onto the chicken before I throw it in the oven. So now I'll get this all set up so that way all of our chicken is facing on the sear side that we're going to be searing first. This just makes it easier when you get over to the pan. You know exactly which side of the chicken that you're going to sear. You don't have to try to figure it out as you're working with the chicken. This marinade here, you could reuse it for more chicken if you'd like, but just make sure that it's labeled that you had raw chicken in there. You don't want to use it for something like vegetables and then forget that you had raw chicken in there. Now that we're over at the stove, I got a couple things that are going to be going on over here, and we're going to try to do things so that everything's getting done around the same time for this dish. So I have a couple pots on. This is going to be used for my rice pilaf. So I have 2 cups of chicken stock here that I'm going to add to this pot here that I'm going to bring up to temperature so it comes up to a boil really quick when I add that to my actual rice pan. So this is my rice pan here, which I'm going to make a rice pilaf, and then I have my pan that I'm going to sear in for the chicken right here. What I'm going to do is use this pan to actually cook my asparagus as well. So not only am I going to cook my chicken first, I'll deglaze that pan, add in some onions and garlic, add my asparagus, and then add any of my other liquids. So now we're ready to actually start searing our chicken. So what we're going to do is start with a little bit of oil in the pan. We're going to let that come up to temperature. We can add an okay amount of oil. We don't want to fry our chicken, but we do want a decent amount of oil. Immediately I could see this pan's nice and hot. So we're just going to wait a little bit for that oil to come up to temperature, and then we can start searing. You actually want to raise the temperature a good bit to account for the fact that when that chicken hits the pan, the temperature of the pan's actually going to cool down. So two things: we don't want to overcrowd our pan, and we don't want our pan to be too cool when we start. We want a nice hot pan. You almost want to see a little bit of vapor coming off of here so that you're getting pretty close to the smoking point of the oil. And now that we're pretty close, we'll just do a little bit of a tester to see. Yep. I'll be very careful. This is going to splatter. We're only going to do 3 pieces of chicken at a time as to not overcrowd our pan. Now, in between batches, we're going to allow this oil to come back up to temperature again. And that fond that's developed on the bottom, that's actually okay. That's actually going to help develop some extra flavors that we're going to get when we add our asparagus into this pan. As I said, let's be careful when you're adding stuff into the pan. You don't want that splatter to get all over you, so it's good to be careful and lay your chicken in away from you. There you can see the sear that we're getting on our chicken. It's pretty nice. I'm happy with that. So we'll take that off. Now we'll drop the heat back down on this pan to about a medium from high. And this extra oil that I have in here, I probably don't need quite this much for what I'm going to be doing next. So I'm actually going to pour off some of this oil. Now that I've gotten rid of a little bit of the oil, I'm going to go ahead and deglaze this pan with a little bit of white wine. To this, I'm now going to add my onions. And we're going to cook those off a little bit. I'm going to add garlic to this as well. That's about half an onion and 4 cloves of garlic. Now, as this is working, starting to saute up, I'm going to start to work on my rice pilaf as well. So get a little bit of heat going on that. And I'm going to take some of this reserved olive oil that came from us marinating our olives, and I'm going to add that to our pan back here. So that has oil in it. It also has the vinegar and everything else that we added into that marinade. And I'm okay with all those flavors being in there. And I'm actually going to kind of saute up my onions. So I have some onions here that I'm going to add to this pan that I'm going to saute up for my pilaf. I also have 2 bay leaves that I'll hold in reserve that I'll add once I add all my liquid and we're ready to put the lid back on. We'll continue to saute up these onions and the garlic, and what you'll see is that it's actually starting to absorb some of that fond that was on the bottom of the pan. I'll just take a little bit of a rubber spatula and kind of help it along, deglazing that pan with these onions. That's picking up all that nice roasty flavor from the chicken, the marinade that was in there. And we'll try to save our edges here a little bit. Now that our back pot is working, you can see the onions are starting to cook a little bit in there. We'll turn up the heat just a little bit. The process of making this pilaf is we sweat down our onions, and then we'll add our rice. We'll parch our rice just a little bit, get it coated in that oil, start to get it a little bit toasty. And then we're going to add our hot chicken stock to that, add our bay leaf, close the lid, and in about 10-15 minutes the rice should be done. And with any luck, we should be finishing up pretty much everything right around the same time. So that's why I'm not rushing the asparagus too much, because the asparagus, once it hits the pan, it's actually going to cook relatively quick. So So we're just kind of sauteing down these onions in the meantime. We're just going to add a little bit of liquid to keep this from reducing down too much. That's just a little bit of water to kind of slow this down just a little bit. And really, I'm getting a lot of those smells from the chicken, getting some smells from that marinade. So I got the onions, the garlic, a little bit of the acidity from the vinegar. It's all kind of coming together to make a fantastic scent that I'm getting right now. And pretty much as soon as I add this rice, that's when I'm going to add my chicken into the oven, because that's going to take about 10-15 minutes to cook as well. And I might even go a little bit earlier because I want that chicken to rest just a little bit before we plate our final dish. So now I could see that my onions are getting a good bit translucent, so we're about ready to add our rice. We're adding 1 cup of rice to this pot. And I said what we're going to do is we're going to mix this, get it nice and coated with the oil. And even get it slightly cooking a little bit where it's going to get slightly toasty. So now our rice pilaf is starting to get a little toasty. It's starting to get a little roasted on the bottom. You can see some of the grains are actually starting to toast up a little bit. So now we know it's about ready to add our chicken stock. This should come up to a boil relatively quick. And then we'll turn the heat on high now, because we really do. We want to bring this up to a boil. We'll give it a little bit of a stir here and there. And this is also when I'm going to add in those bay leaves that I was holding in reserve. So in go the bay leaves. And then as soon as this comes up to a boil is when we're going to go ahead and throw the lid on it. You could even add a little bit of seasoning at this point. So I'm going to add just a touch of salt. And we'll season this again at the end when it comes out. We'll taste everything and make sure that it's seasoned properly. So now that I see that this is up to a boil, one last quick stir, and on goes the lid. We'll reduce this to a medium-low. Now we turn our attention back to our asparagus pan. The asparagus are about ready to add into this pan. So everything's kind of coming together at this point. So we'll grab our asparagus, add that into the pan. And to this, we're going to add our lemon juice and our lemon zest. That'll kind of all cook in together. And we'll even turn this temperature up just slightly so it comes up to temperature a little bit. Now we're going to add just a little bit of water to give this some liquid so it can steam just a little bit. And then we'll hit the asparagus with a little bit of salt. And a little bit of pepper. We're going to let that come back up to temperature, and we'll work with that in just a little bit. Our chicken has probably about 8 minutes to go, so we're just going to give this a little bit of a toss to kind of mix in the seasonings a little bit. Try to keep them all facing the same way if we can. And we're even going to throw a little bit of a lid on top of this, just to allow it to steam a little bit. And as we're cooking here, the other thing we're going to try to do is keep things as clean as we possibly can, especially with all that grease splattering around. It's important to try to keep a clean workspace as you go. This is going to make final cleanup a lot easier as well. Now I'm kind of going off my oven timer that's cooking the chicken right now for both my rice and the asparagus. Here I'll just keep an eye on as we go along. And then once we're done here, we'll kind of assemble everything and plate up. And we'll make sure that, again, we have all the things that we need to do that plate up and be ready to go. So it's been a few minutes. I'm going to go ahead and check on my asparagus. Always be mindful that lids can be hot. Open them away from you so that way there's no danger of you actually burning yourself with the steam. And then keep in mind condensation will build on the lid, so hold the lid over the pot for just a few moments until you can move it safely. These asparagus are looking pretty nice. I don't want to overcook these asparagus. You just want to cook them till they're slightly tender. And you can see that they have a beautiful green color to them right now. So I'm going to take one just to taste test, and I'll try one of these larger ones just to see kind of where we're at. And I can tell you, they have just another minute to them, and they're going to need a little bit more seasoning as well. So we'll give these just a few more moments to cook. Toss them around with those onions and that garlic. We're picking up some of that lemon that we added into the pan, and then we're just going to hit with a touch more salt. Really, secret to a lot of good cooking is just the seasoning. Sometimes you season food, but you don't really put enough seasoning into it. And these are so close. I'm just going to pull the heat off. I'm going to turn it off, and I'm just going to let some of this residual heat kind of work its magic with these asparagus. We'll give them a toss or two just to coat them in that broth that they're cooking in, and these will be ready to go right around the time everything else is. And what we're looking for our chicken is we're going to pull it out a little bit early. I know everybody says you cook chicken at 165, and it's correct, you do, but you don't temp your chicken at 165 because it's going to carry over cook. Anything that's been in an oven retains some of that heat. And depending on the size of the item, if it's a large roast, it's going to retain a lot more heat because of the mass of the object than something like a chicken thigh, but it still will carry over a little bit. So we're going to account for that and probably pull our chicken around 5 to 10 degrees before it hits 165. You can always check your chicken as you're going, and you adjust the time based off of that. And now it's roughly about time for us to start to check on our rice pilaf. So what we're going to do, again, watch the lid when we pull it off. Pull it out and away, and keep in mind there's probably going to be a little bit of moisture here. We're just going to kind of take a look and see if that liquid has been absorbed. And the other thing we could do is we could test this rice using a tasting spoon just to see where the doneness is. And I can tell you right now, that rice is done perfectly. There's still a little bit of moisture in there, but what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and peel out these little bay leaves here. We're going to do the final seasoning. The rest of this moisture is going to absorb off as we go. And then we're going to just kind of fluff our rice and hit with a little bit of salt just to adjust the seasoning there. And as we fluff our rice, we're just going to run our spatula through just like this and kind of softly turn it over. And you can see the rice is still a little bit wet, so we can kind of just keep that on the burner in the back with no lid on it and allow some of that moisture to evaporate off. And the texture that you're looking for on your rice in a rice pilaf is you don't want the rice to be mush. You want there to be a little bit of a chew to that rice. That way it has a little bit of texture, and then all of the grains should be individual. There should be no clumping, there should be no mushiness. If you get to that point, you've gone too far, or you may have stirred your rice too much in the beginning, which is something that you look for in risotto, but you're not looking for in a rice pilaf. And now that our chicken's ready, go ahead and pull it from the oven. We're going to allow it to cool just slightly. let it to rest, maybe about 10 minutes or so, and it'll be set and ready to go. Now, I've got all my other ingredients ready for plating here, so as soon as this chicken's ready, we'll go ahead and start plating. Now we've given our chicken some time to cool, we're going to get right into the plating. So I got my plate set and ready here. I have all my other ingredients that I'm going to need for this dish. So let's go ahead and start plating. So you can use whatever dish that you like. You can get creative with your plating ideas. So I'm just going to put some rice straight down the center of this. We'll tidy that up just a little bit. Need a little bit more rice. And I'm wearing gloves because that just makes it nice and neat to be able to kind of manipulate the food a little bit, and you don't have to worry about necessarily getting your hands in the food. So I'm going to take a little bit of asparagus here, either side. Line it up just like that, and we're even going to hit it with a little bit of this onion here. It's really good kind of caramelized onion flavors going on there. And then we're going to move on to our chicken, which we're going to just slice out. Right over top of our asparagus. We're going to garnish with some of these olives around the plate. Give them a little bit of a mix. We'll do a little bit of broken up feta cheese. And then we'll hit this with some herbs over top. This is a mixture of parsley, mint, and a little bit of oregano as well. This is my take on a Greek chicken using chicken thighs, rice pilaf, some marinated olives. So we marinated the chicken overnight as well. And I hope you can give this recipe a try. Let me know what you think. And I hope you enjoy. Now for this Greek chicken recipe, what we did is we took that basic marinade recipe and we altered it to suit our use for the Greek chicken. We did this by adding lemon juice, olive juice, garlic, and then herbs in the form of oregano and thyme. Now these are all flavors that kind of invoke that Greek style of cooking and flavors that you'll see in that Greek style of cooking. Then what we did is we took a bit of that marinade and we actually used it for a rice pilaf. This kind of just helped tie all those pieces of the dish together and gave some unifying elements. We also used that marinade to marinate some olives, which were used as a garnish on the dish. And this just kind of elevated some of the flavors on the dish themselves, while still appreciating those original flavors from the ingredients. So I really hope you get a chance to try this recipe. Let me know in the comments down below what you think if you did try it, and if you made any variations. such as switching up the vegetable a little bit. Doesn't have to be asparagus, it could be anything you'd like. You could even switch up the starch if you'd like, and maybe you toss some roasted potatoes in that marinade and throw those in the oven. There's a multitude of ways that you could customize dishes when you're cooking, and that's just part of the fun of cooking in general, is being able to customize things and just learning some of the basic techniques that you can use. That way you get comfortable in the kitchen, kind of coming up with your own variations on things. That's it from Ogre's Kitchen. Time to sweep, mop, and go home. If you enjoyed today's video, please like and feel free to share. Subscribe for more content and hit that notification bell for when new videos are uploaded. For all those who are subscribed, thank you for your support. Hope to see you next time, and until then, keep those cauldrons bubbling and feast well.